This episode of The Benefit Whisper is brought to you by Route 3 Insurance and Financial Services, where smarter benefits begin. If you're tired of rising healthcare costs and opaque insurance contracts, Route 3 is here to help you take control. They specialize in transparent, employer-driven benefit strategies that protect your people and your bottom line. Ready to break away from the status quo? Visit www.fixmybenefitsnow.com and discover how Route 3 can help you build a plan that actually works for your team and for your budget. Okay. $5.28 trillion. That's what we spent in healthcare in the U.S. 2024. So if you had 5% on that, that's $5.5 trillion. It's out of control. But that's not billion, that's trillion. And that's 18% of our GDP. Almost one out of every $5 goes to pay for healthcare. But what is healthcare? Is it medical treatment? Is it the financing? It's the whole thing. But you put it into perspective, Chris, in a good way. And I've said this before. That represents more than the GDP of any country except for the US and China. It's bigger than Germany's entire GDP. 80 million Germans would have to work 27 hours a day to pay for just our healthcare costs.
Right.
That's crazy.
Right.
But this is a second year in a row where it has gone up 7%. So today we're going to ask a different question. Not why is healthcare expensive, but why does healthcare behave like a system where money can't move cleanly? Because when payment is delayed, disrupted, intermediated, the entire system stops functioning like an industry and it functions like something else. I'm Ralph Weber, and this is The Benefit Whisper. Welcome to The Benefit Whisper, the show where we pull back the curtain on what's really driving healthcare costs and what employers can do about it without getting trapped inside a rigged system. Today, I have an incredible guest back, the third time. Chris, welcome to the show, Chris Deacon.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be back.
Yeah, no, it's great. I follow you on LinkedIn. I read everything you say, and it's amazing. Last time we talked about how you saved, correct me if I'm wrong, $2 billion, right, in pharmacy spend and another $500 million in medical. Is that right?
That's right.
Wow, $2.5 billion. That is amazing. So your next challenge is to save $2.5 trillion. I'm sure you could do it with the right tools.
I was going to say, it is doable.
Yeah. It totally is doable. Absolutely. So you oversaw a benefit for the state of New Jersey, over 800,000 lives. Is that right?
Yeah, at the time.
Wow, that's big. So I listen to you. I listen to every word. You're one of the clearest voices out there in the country right now on healthcare transparency, contracts, and what it actually means to act like a fiduciary in a system where they don't want you to see the truth. They're like that scene. You want the truth? You can't handle the truth. That's what they're trying to tell us. But I had Marilyn Bartlett on yesterday. The two of you are powerhouses. Chris, the lawyer, Marilyn, the accountant, together, an unstoppable pair. So that's great.
And we do work together quite often, so it's fun.
Yeah, she was saying that. I wanted to start by talking about that LinkedIn post yesterday. Is that a good starting point?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So that 5.28 trillion, 18%. So it's not just really a sector of the economy anymore. It's not 18% of the economy. It's something that can crowd out education, infrastructure, and basic public services. And it even becomes a risk to national resilience. Okay, so let's start there. So from everything you're seeing right now, Chris, what feels more urgent in healthcare right now?
What feels more urgent?
Yeah, the trajectory, as you pointed out, is huge. Where do we start? Where do we start to turn this around?
Wow, well, that's a heck of a question to start with. But I think that we don't have to in year one like blow it up and have sort of a tragedy or something breaks in the system and we're left scrambling and lives are lost. And, I do think that there are so many things that we can do to start turning turning the Titanic, if you will, because there's so much fat in the system.
Yes, absolutely. There's a lot to unpack. There's huge, and I agree. We can't just, it needs to be rebuilt from the ground up, but we can't start there. The problem is right now, as you point out, it's that acceleration, it's the trajectory. Like even the 2 years at 7% to 5.28, if we add another just 5, which is less, that brings it to 5.54. A quarter of $1 trillion increase every year. I mean, that's not sustainable. We can't do that. So the
And
official explanation is higher usage, higher intensity, hospital spending up, physicians and clinical services up, prices are rising. You wrote something that I think is a real headline. Here's what you said, and I love this. When new technology gets layered into a system that is structurally misaligned, it doesn't bend the curve, it accelerates it. I believe that. So where do you think technology doesn't save us in healthcare, where it saves us everywhere else?
well, I think, watching how AI has been layered into the system is a really good example
Mhm.
because it's primarily been focused in the revenue optimization section, right? And so it's a great example of technology innovation that we layer in to a system that it's going to accelerate whatever the bad thing is. And the bad thing in this case is just, this exploding cost. But I think, you know, your point on the trajectory is so spot on. And it's one of the reasons I've have such an issue with like these cost growth benchmark programs. And, you know, we need to stop expecting growth because we're not getting anything in return, right? If we were getting better health outcomes, a healthier population,
Right.
something for our money. But we're sitting there, sort of writing a blank check without expecting a better product or better outcomes from that product. And I think that that's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a huge problem. And, the growth outpaces the growth of the GDP. It paces wages. And we've had a lot of people talk about how what the things were that made it do that. One of them is, making it a, pre-tax benefit, which makes it falsely look like less. That's just one of the many things. Just before we started, you showed me that book about the birth of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And I just the last 5 episodes I did, I talked about that. 1929, the Baylor teachers plan in Texas. During the Depression, the
Mhm.
hospitals were swimming in debt. They were in debt up to here. People were going bankrupt. It was the Depression. Nobody was working. The Baylor teachers plan was a prepaid health plan, and the premiums were $6 a year. Imagine
Right.
that. And the whole purpose of starting that was so that people could budget, that hospitals could count on revenue. And that makes a lot of sense. There was absolutely no problem with that. I think what happened, Chris, is once there was a third party payer system, we weren't paying ourselves. We started to be removed from the prices. Prices were no longer single signal. That's just one of the things. And you're right, technology, hospitals today have a lot of debt. The average days to collection are sometimes 6 months. And in any other industry, that would be called distressed finance. And these layers of technology, revenue cycle management, AI denials. I hear about that all the time where some of the carriers are auto denying. And then you need a bunch of people to fight that. So to me, just to make it a little bit more real for employers, because we're talking big foundational systems here. So if we talk about AI, cancer therapies, expanded use of weight loss drugs, things like that, some things that people think are unexpected on a large scale, they're not, but you know exactly what to expect on the large scale. But an employer on a smaller scale, what can they do? How can we make it real for them? What should they expect is a better question.
I think the unfortunate answer is you have to expect the unexpected. And that's where the approach to healthcare and your healthcare spend should be one of, risk identification and risk mitigation, right?
Mhm.
You're right now, they think they're buying health insurance and sort of offloading that to, they're paying for it. The idea that they're buying insurance, especially if they're self-funded, they're buying healthcare services. and
Right.
there's risk and there's way to hedge risk. Just like your property and casualty, when you run your business, you identify the risk, you try to mitigate for the risk, and then ultimately have your backstop. And if employers were to approach healthcare with more of that mindset, I think it would go a really long way.
Yeah. No, no, I agree because most businesses manage risk in other areas. And depending on what the business is in, that's the risk. Is the risk of not collecting money? Is the risk if you're a construction company, accidents? Is there OSHA type things? So yes, risk management is huge. I love what you said, Chris. People have just expected, we'll just offload that risk to the insurance company, but they're in the business of making money off of risk, life insurance, property and casualty, that kind of real insurance where you pay premiums for 20, 30, 40 years. And you don't sit there every year and say, darn it, didn't die this year. I didn't collect, right? That's real insurance. Health insurance really isn't because it's money you put away for, using the medical loss ratio for about 15 months, at the most. So it's money you expect to use. So planning for the unexpected, planning for those spikes, like the GLP-1s, like the cancer treatments, like, those kinds of things. So is there anything that can be done in the contract? Because you always speak a lot about the contract to mitigate that kind of thing.
Right. I think it's important for the employers to always preserve their right and ability to mitigate that risk with, it might be another vendor. So not being beholden to use the same stop loss carrier that, and being able to shop that out yourself, or PBM services, or perhaps you strike a deal where you want to directly purchase drugs from a manufacturer. All these things are, tools in your toolbox of risk mitigation, but usually your contract says you don't get to mitigate your risk.
Yeah.
Bear it, pay for
Mhm.
it, but we're going to control all those levers that would allow you to manage it. So the more levers you can either preserve to hold in the future or hold in the moment, the better.
No, I agree completely, and it's the vertical integration that is accelerating that. When the insurance company owns the PBM, when they own the health system, when an insurance company owns a medical school. Did you hear about that yesterday? Or
Yes.
the other day? Mark Cuban posted. It becomes, I think the profit makers in healthcare, they see number one, they see doctors just as, money-making machines,
Right.
RVUs, that's it. You're right. If they say you can't use anybody but our PPM, anybody but our stop loss, then you have a problem. And they make it look. I've talked to clients where they talk to one of the big, insurance companies, one of the bukas, and their admin fees seem really low. Okay. And they're really attracted by that. But it's all in the fine print. It's all in the contract, all in the details.
Right. Yeah. And the vertical integration piece is huge. I mean, I
Mhm.
think that I did a post on this maybe last week, but we do have sort of a vertical where the insurance carrier or TPA that you're entrusting to negotiate on your behalf and lower the cost of healthcare, they own the provider, they own the specialty pharmacy, they own the mail pharmacy, they own pharmacies and networks of pharmacies, they own physicians, they own hospitals, they own physician groups, they even own drug manufacturers. So what again, when it comes to levers to pull, we have employers, and that's why I think the carving out thing is so important in preserving your right to do that, because those affiliates and those affiliated conflicts, like they're usually not disclosed to the employer. Um, so maybe that's part of what you demand in that contract is sort of transparency about knowing, if my negotiated rate for provider A is $100 and my negotiated rate for provider B is 150, I should know that you own provider B,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Do you remember the lawsuit, Calhoun County, Michigan versus Blue Cross? That
Uh,
it was a long time ago, 10,
okay.
15 years ago. That it was about self-dealing, which I think this is. Um, when that's a great point. When you own, whether it's the drug manufacturer, the drug store, healthcare provider, and they charge more, and you can't see that. That is, in my mind, self-dealing. But it's not just about premiums anymore. And unfortunately, it's become so complicated. A lot of employers that's all they can focus on, and they delegate it down to the human resources. The CFO, I think, needs to be involved and have it really overall as a risk strategy. When you think about Starbucks, they spend more on healthcare than coffee beans. You know, every minute in the US, a family goes bankrupt. So this is a huge problem, and we have to start working on it. We have to get the system to start functioning efficiently, not for the profit seekers, the rent seekers, but to allow businesses to invest in people, invest in growth, invest in the GDP.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, American competitiveness is definitely harmed as a
Yeah.
result of this massive expenditure that employers that might be considering expanding or might be considering locating a plant here. It's definitely not a draw. Let's just say that.
Yeah, no, no, no. It isn't anymore. And that's what we have to fix, Chris. And it's a huge job. Um, I personally, I mean, there's so many things. Liquidity, we spoke about. If the hospital could expect, like in most industries, you buy in airlines, you pay before you fly.
Right.
When you go to a restaurant, you pay when you finish. When you shop on Amazon, you pay when you order. In healthcare, the provider gets the money sometimes 6 or 8 months or longer after they've provided the service, and collection is uncertain. They don't know if they're gonna get 100%, and they never get 100%. So because of that, this is my theory, they layer on top for that contingency, okay, because they're unsure. Is that something that I is fixable in the short
Mhm.
term?
Yes. I mean, straight up, yes. I think that we have the technology, we have the financial rails, we have the know how to be
Mhm.
able to process these transactions near real time. But we have companies whose sole purpose is to not have those process in real time
Yeah.
and who have to have a function because they're so large. And so that's one of the reasons that we're not moving in that direction quickly enough. But you talk about the Baylor plan from 1929. One of the things I think is really interesting, you know, that was first dollar coverage. I'm buying this coverage, I go to the hospital, and my coverage kicks in. I get whatever it is, 30 days at the hospital.
Right.
We've now somehow gotten to a place where we are spending way more than $6 a month for our premiums.
Mhm.
In addition, we have deductibles and out of pocket limits that are so high that, people are avoiding the hospital, just like the problem in 1929 during the
Yeah.
Depression. I've even heard stories of folks buying insurance to get them through to the insurance, right? For that
Yeah.
big gap when whether that's through Aflac or some sort of voluntary benefit.
Mhm.
But think how insane that is that we have people actually buying insurance because their insurance is too expensive to access care. But,
Yeah.
back to the fundamental question is you're right. The hospitals, because of the increasing out of pocket, have
Mhm.
become creditors of sort. Um, okay, I need my hospital. I need hospitals in my community to be strong. I need their finances to be strong, fair, but strong. And I need to pay fair prices for healthcare for my employees. In order to do those 2 things, we need to remove and peel back as many layers in the middle as possible.
Mhm.
I wanna pay my hospital a fair amount.
Right.
I don't want them to have to, go to collections. So how do we get to a place where I'm paying for healthcare, maybe not upfront, but maybe it's, a hold for the $2,500 colonoscopy I show up,
Mhm.
all goes well, it's a standard colonoscopy, that 2,500 gets released into my bank account, I'm not chasing anyone. maybe there's a polyp and you have to do some more stuff in there and it's now a $5,000. I issue that claim, I explain it in code, and it's paid. I mean, yeah, I know I'm simplifying things, but the reality is we have the technology to be able to do this and do it more quickly. But when your existence is, when your value proposition is being in the middle of all of these transactions, they're not going to bring that technology and innovation to the front.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chris. You're right. Because that, like, out of every healthcare dollar, there's so many numbers out of there, but I think about a third of it is waste. It doesn't go to medical care. The ACA, with a medical loss ratio, pretended that it was trying to fix that. It didn't really. It was just an incentive to increase costs even more because it fixed that margin.
Yeah.
And
Even that gets gamed, I mean, through reinsurance with internal affiliates.
right.
With Elevance can now reinsure itself
Yeah.
and keep the benefit of the MLR if there is profit in an internal affiliate and never have to disclose that to you. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. No, no, no. Exactly. But if we think about, about 30%, that's 1.7 trillion a year. And I had David Schenker on. Do you know David?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I had David on a few weeks ago. He did the BIR study with Dr. Schulman and I forget a couple of people, the BIR, building insurance related costs, and they talked about those costs and they talked about the waste, and he pegged it at 1.7 trillion. That we spend just administering the payments, and if we took that part out and we just, like you say, we paid the doctor directly and we had insurance for catastrophic things, real insurance, we'd save a lot of money. We'd save a ton of money.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think, we know that this conversation is oversimplifying it.
Mhm.
But that
Yes.
but that being said, I think you have to start from sort of a simple premise, right? A simple foundation. What are we trying
Mhm.
to accomplish here?
Right.
And build from there. If we were to build a healthcare system today with the technology we have today and
Mhm.
with the capabilities we have today, we would not build what we have.
No.
And so we need to take those blinders off of what exists, imagine what we would build if we could from the ground up.
Right.
How can we, and again, that's when I say thinking outside the box, like we need a box.
Right.
Get rid of the box.
Yeah. No, I absolutely right. And we've talked a lot about the delay in payments, the uncertainty, so it's become several things: litigation, bankruptcy, insurance recoveries, contracting disputes. It's really not a service industry anymore. What is the industry? What is the healthcare industry? That's really what we have to think about. And you're right. If we were building it, it would be about the medical care and just how to pay for it efficiently.
Right. Well, and I think just to sort of stop there,
Sure.
put a it would be about providing medical care,
Hmm.
but I think one of our original sins is entrusting health and wellness to the
Hmm.
healthcare industry,
Yeah.
right? They're not going to eat their own, if you will, right? When a hospital system is dependent upon heads and beds and or, a particular number of surgeries at the outpatient, if they need that,
Hmm.
right, there is a disincentive to keep from a population health level, keep people healthy. But all of our healthcare, broad healthcare, health and all those healthcare dollars, at least from the government, have all been funneled into this sick care system, calling it
Yeah.
healthcare, leaving nothing to address the 80% of what actually determines our health, right? Our
Hmm.
social determinants of health. So we've entrusted, and I think we're trying to reverse engineer this to work through
Hmm.
value-based care. But at the end of the day, you cannot expect an entity to be the cause of its own demise through actually improving the health and well-being of the population.
Right. Like if I I don't know if I ever told you this. I used to be an air traffic controller, so I can kind of visualize many things moving at the same time. And the healthcare system, the way I see it, there's a Model T Ford and it's got things strapped onto it and bolted onto it. And, at the very top, the AI, that's a jet engine strapped
Mm,
onto a Model T Ford. So all of those bolt-ons and add-ons and, they make it more complicated and they make it more opaque. So maybe opacity is the product.
yeah.
Who's actually bearing the risk today and who should bear it? And if we think about opacity as the product, because that's the moneymaker, isn't it, Chris? For the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where there's, I think Stacey Richter says this, where there's mystery, there's margin.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah, exactly. So we just get so confused and we throw our hands up and we say, this is so complicated, and then they say, okay, we can make money on this. And then, if you want to see your own claims, I talked to Marilyn Bartlett yesterday about this and Chris Condalucci. If you want to see your own claims, they'll sell you your own data. I mean, that's outrageous.
right. Right. And they also sell your data to third parties. And, they slap in the face. They tell you they're going to do it in your contract.
Hmm. Hmm.
They specifically say we can use this for other business purposes, i.e., to generate revenue,
Yeah.
and that's what they do.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think that there are a few takeaways, and we kind of got a little bit deep into the weeds, but I think we have to kind of start from there. So, admin complexity, is it a necessary evil or is it just a profitable feature?
I think in today's world, it is necessary, but I think again, it's become a moneymaker,
Yeah, it has, and
no
and, and
doubt.
that's sad. So, Chris, what do you think for employers? What do you think the most dangerous assumption that they make about healthcare is, and what they can do about it?
I think the most dangerous assumption is that they can't do anything about it. One, I think that's up there on the list of the top three, at least. I think the other front runner is believing that your broker, your consultant, your PBM, your TPA is really working in your best interests. And that doesn't mean they're not good people. That doesn't mean that your, contract administrator or your point person or the consultant that's been with you for 20 years is trying to stab you in the back. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying from a business perspective, the economics of your relationship mean that they will not and cannot keep your best interests at the forefront. It will always be their business and economic interests that will take precedence over yours. But if you know that, right, you can make smarter decisions. You can solve for some of those things by asking about conflicts and being aware of them. Yeah, and I think that it's a difficult problem to solve, and we
Mhm.
aren't going to get rid of conflicts no matter how much legislation we pass.
Right.
But knowing they exist
Mhm.
really is 90%, I think, of the game so that you can then manage that and manage that risk appropriately.
Yeah. No, absolutely. When we shop for things, when we shop for anything, whether it's Amazon, whether it's home renovations, whatever, we usually ask 2 or 3 different people. We get a couple of bids, we compare prices. Okay, we don't do that in healthcare because it's not the product. Okay, so we're not comparing prices. Imagine if Amazon sold you something and they billed you 120 days after through 3 middlemen, and you weren't allowed to see the invoice. That's kind of the way
That's what we do.
that's what we do. And because healthcare is different. Wow. Wow. A lot to talk. What where does an employer start? So here's kind of my opinion. Let me know if I'm wrong. Given that there is the possibility of the consultant doing something which is in their best interest or the administrator or the TPA, okay? Um, how about getting a second opinion? And that doesn't mean a second quote, just getting somebody to review the contract language, maybe the disclosures. What can be done there?
Yeah, I think that there's an opportunity, and you mentioned like RFPs
Mhm.
in that RFP process.
Mhm.
to bring in if you can, and it can even be an internal resource. Maybe you have somebody in procurement section or finance that you can pull in or accounting,
Mhm.
to have a new perspective on both the RFP process and how it's run, as well as the contract that you're negotiating
Mhm.
after. Again, I think like an independent, objective voice, because who usually runs your RFP, right? It's your consultant and
The
broker,
incumbent, yeah.
right? Or the incumbent, and they're in charge of data exchange a lot that can influence the outcome. So having a disinterested party that's only fee based at the outset that can give you solid advice, I think is a really big opportunity, and it will pay dividends when it comes to that investment, that small investment up front.
Did a PBM proposal last year for about $72 million pharmacy spend, and the RFP had been written by a consultant, not an independent consultant. Somebody with, I mean, we've heard the stories about how much do they get per script sometimes.
Mhm.
Yeah, like up to $10, $15 per
I heard a
prescription.
$25.
25, wow. And I have no idea if this consultant, was or wasn't, but if I look at the way the questions are worded, it was based on the discount, and we
Mhm.
all know that that's a false narrative. Look at what Mark Cuban's doing, cost plus.
Right.
It shouldn't be price minus, it should be cost plus a reasonable margin. So getting a second opinion, getting a second set of eyes from somebody that's not involved, that has nothing to gain by
Right.
it, that you just pay a flat fee for. What gives you hope, Chris? What gives you hope that we can, like right now, what are the most positive things that you see in healthcare that's starting to turn the Titanic?
I have seen some technology and platforms and use of existing technology that I think can sort of make a reality, sort of what I described earlier. And that's again removing the layers in the middle and moving the transaction closer between the purchaser, payer, and the provider. The closer we get to that, the better.
Mhm.
And I do, I have hope. I also am a realist, and
Mhm.
I don't think that it's going to be an easy road, because
Right.
the incumbents, I mean, United, they must control some meaningful percentage of our GDP,
Mhm.
given the size of the 18%.
Yeah.
Um, and so I don't know when it happens, how it happens, but I do believe it's going to. I don't know if it's because I have to believe,
Yeah.
but yeah.
No, I saw on your LinkedIn post a day or 2 ago, I remember United Healthcare, and I remember the number 150, and it was bigger than any other one. I forget if it was 150 million or billion, but it was way bigger, and they're gonna fight. The big, players are gonna fight. At 5.5 trillion, healthcare just is no longer a cost problem. It's a structural risk. And we could go on and on, but bottom line, as you said, when new technology gets layered into a structurally misaligned system, it doesn't bend the curve, it accelerates it.
Absolutely.
So, Chris, thank you again for being on the Benefit Whisper. You're always great to have here. Your insight is great. If people want to follow you, find out more about your book, find out about your services, how can they contact you?
Yeah, so I would say LinkedIn is probably the best place to like follow me and my content. I also have a Substack that's linked there. And the book, The Great American Healthcare Heist, is available on Amazon. Or if you want a bulk order, you can just message me directly. And I can get that set up for you. But yeah, those are the channels. And I'm pretty good about responding, and want to be accessible. And I think having conversations with people both who are in alignment with my thinking and who are not is really, so
Yeah,
always a challenger.
right. Absolutely. The Great American Healthcare Heist. I love that title because that's it. That's what's happening. So great. Thank you so much for the clarity for everybody listening. If you have found this episode interesting, do me a favor, subscribe Share it. Share it with an employer, HR leader, CFO who needs to hear this, legislator even. And if you're looking at your own contracts, your PBM arrangement or your plan design, reach out. I can certainly help you to have a look, give you some advice. I know some really good people that have been some amazing guests here. I'm Ralph Weber, the Benefit Whisperer. And if you want to contact us, follow us. We're at thebenefitwhisperer.com. You can email me, Ralph at thebenefitwhisperer, or call 832-924-3330. Again, thanks, Chris, for being here and your amazing insight.
Great. Thanks for having me.